Well, we've spoken a little bit about how Israel implemented policies, economic policies, against the Palestinian population of Palestine. But there were also attempts by the Arab population, especially Arab states surrounding Israel, to try to fight back against Israel's expansion in the Middle East and to try to boycott the Israeli economy. That is known as the Arab boycott. The Arab boycott was not only focused on preventing trade between the Arab states and the Israeli state or the Israeli companies, but also it was a boycott against all international companies that traded with Israel. As a result, many international companies, especially fast food companies or soft drink companies or car companies, refused to open branches in Israel because they were worried about the Arab boycott. The Arab boycott largely failed. It failed because Israel, during the years of the Arab boycott, created alternative industries locally which were able to fill the need of the local Israeli economy without the need of the international companies, because also it was before the age of globalization, and so a lot of economies around the world were more self-sufficient than they are today, and also because in the 1990s, when Israel began to participate in the Oslo negotiations, the peace process, leading supposedly to the creation of a Palestinian state, something that has never happened, there was a lot of international pressure on Arab states to lift the boycott. And indeed, almost all of the Arab states did lift the boycott. It was dismantled. International companies started to open branches in Israel, such as Coca-Cola and McDonald's, Intel, and others. And as they did so, Israel was quickly became one of the most globalized economies in the world. But now there is a different call for boycott. And the different call for boycott that is not state-based, but is grassroots-based. It's based on civil society organizations. The inspiration for the boycott is clearly the boycott against South Africa apartheid. During the late years of apartheid in South Africa, there was a wide range boycott against South Africa, adopted by many countries, not only by individuals and civil society organizations, but even states made it illegal to trade with South Africa. As a result, South Africa was isolated from the international economy, and eventually apartheid collapsed. There is a lot of debate and a lot of arguments whether the boycott movement was really the most important aspect of the struggle against apartheid, and maybe it was other elements of the struggle that eventually were able to defeat apartheid. And this debate is something very important, and we will come back to it in a following segment. But in the current segment, it's important to say that as a result of the success of the boycott against South Africa, at least the success of the movement and the collapse of apartheid, Palestinians who were very disillusioned with the failure of the peace process, the failure of the Oslo negotiations, and came to realize that the negotiating position between Israel and the Palestinians is not a fair one, not an equal one, and that the international community continually fails to force Israel to implement its side of the bargain, its side of the agreements, they've started to look for a non-violent alternative to the struggle against occupation, the struggle against injustice, the struggle against apartheid in Israel as well. And in 2005, there was a call that was joined by hundreds of civil society organizations in Palestine, known as the BDS call. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, which means boycott of Israeli goods, divestment from Israeli companies and also from international companies that provide the tools for the Israeli government to continue the occupation, to continue the repression, and sanctions. Sanctions include international sanctions or country-based sanctions, refusal to cooperate with the Israeli state, refusal to upgrade the diplomatic relations with Israel. So this call, BDS, has been a massive call by the Palestinian society. Not only by civil society organizations, it was quickly joined also by a lot of trade unions, by a lot of organizations within Israel of 48 Palestinians or Israeli Palestinians, and it was also joined by massive calls from Palestinians in the diaspora, Palestinian refugees who live all around the world. Even Palestinian political parties signed the petition and joined the call for BDS because despite of the many disagreements between Fatah and Hamas, for example, they all share the common goal of struggling for freedom. BDS, first of all, is a non-violent call. It's not the use of arms against Israel, although according to international law, Palestinians have a right to rise up in arms against a foreign occupation, like any people have that right. But the call for BDS is to try something different. And the reason that this call has been adopted is not to punish Israel. And it's not to try to have the same policies that Israel imposes on the Palestinians also on Israel in order to create a kind of status quo or to create a kind of parallel. No, the tool is a political, tactical tool that is adopted by the Palestinian organizations because they believe it can be an effective way to pressure Israel to recognize international law and meet its obligations. BDS has 3 demands. The first demand, end the occupation of the occupied Palestinian territories, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, of course, and the Gaza Strip. The second demand, recognize the right of return of Palestinian refugees scattered around the world and allow them the right to return to Palestine, to return to their homeland, and to be compensated for the property that they have lost in 1948. And third, recognize the right of Palestinian citizens of Israel to be treated as full, equal citizens of the state, to be treated no differently than the Jewish citizens of the state, and to be full members of the of a democratic regime in Israel. These 3 demands are paralleled by the international law. The international law already requires Israel to do these 3 things. So that means that, in fact, BDS only calls on Israel to meet its obligations under the international law.